we should understand this, that the progression of temptation, that we can recognize this, that it was what he saw in this story. This is just a story. What this guy saw was what led his heart astray. It was the first step that started leading him astray. And we can recognize this, that it's a pretty face. A pretty face, the attractiveness of another person, that if we allow our brain to feed on that and to replay, remember, we're a chemical system. And that temptation that Satan comes in as he tries to push the buttons to get the reproduction of that thought, the juices going within our mind to lead us astray. Next thing that we find here within this is we kind of navigate through these verses here, we get down to verse number 13. It says, and so she caught him and she kissed him. And I hope I'm pronouncing this word right, with an impotent face. And she said to him, I have peace offerings, and she works her way down onto this. Watch. So it goes from what he saw to what he felt. There's this young guy here. You know, he was devoid of wisdom, devoid of understanding. He was passing by, and suddenly he was struck with a temptation, with a visual attraction, a pretty face, and then it moved where, wham, all of a sudden, this girl kissed him. It was a nice feeling here. And you can see the progression of what's happening here. Okay, now why this is a story, these things play out in the lives of real people here now. Whether it's starting a bad relationship or whether it's an adulterous relationship that happens with marriages, and people go awry. They needs are no longer being met within the marriage, if you will. Time, distance, problems, struggles, whatever, and we turn off towards each other. And because we remain in these places of fighting and struggle and not working things out, or some people age and they move to this place to where sexuality is stopped. They're no longer intimate with each other anymore. They start this at 40 and 50 and 60 and 70. Listen, I am a strong proponent. I believe as long as you have breath within your lungs, that why sex looks different from when you're 20 to when you're 70, but intimacy is still involved in the reality of that. And I don't know how a woman is wired. I'm not an expert on that, but I do know, unfortunately, of all the pitfalls of the way that men are wired. And when it comes to a pretty face and a nice feeling, I think that whether you're a man or a woman, that you could fall prey to those types of things. Watch, the story goes on. Look what happens next. Verse 17. This gal steps out there and she says, listen, I've got peace offerings with me. Today I've paid my vows. I came out to meet you. And in verse number 17, she says, I have perfumed my bed with myrrh and aloes and cinnamon. Come and let us take our fill of love until morning. If you could recognize this, that what he smelled, you see that the Bible speaks to us this way in 1 John. The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, that Satan loves to push the temporal buttons here to draw us into these areas, to cast a net out in such a way as to pull us away. We live in a digital age. And while what we're describing here is a very physical face-to-face action, if you will, these things can transfer, if you will, into this area of online voyeurism as well. Our phones, our computers, whatever else. And it leads us into this fantasy realm. In this story, this was a face-to-face thing that was going on. And the next thing that happens right there, verse number 17, understand that Satan is pushing all the buttons. What he smelled, a pretty face, a nice feeling, and a smell. I think we can all relate to that in the sensuality of our own humanity, if you will. Now, he goes on and skip down for just a moment to verse number 21. In verse number 21, he says, with her enticing speech, she caused him to yield. With her flattering lips, she seduced him. What he heard, these flattering words, the things that he heard. And in our marriage retreat, my wife, Jody, and I, we have the opportunity to not necessarily go to this chapter, but to uncover these topics. And you'll be surprised at how many marriages are even good Christian marriages that are flirting around with some of these things that you guys see on the list, a pretty face, a nice feeling, a good smell, flattering words, and all of this stuff, that people are teetering around on these things. And while not everybody goes to the point of crossing the line of getting into the sexual act, many toy with these things and respond to these things because needs are not being met inside the framework of the marriage. And that becomes a serious topic within the church. And I think it's important that churches have marriage retreats. I think it's important that we teach the totality of the scripture. And I think it's important that we teach men to be men, women to be women, that married people to be husband and wife and what those things look like. And I tell you that why we're speaking about young men in this particular case, this translates to women as well. In fact, what we're finding in more recent decades is that more and more women are falling prey to this aspect of adultery and seduction in paces that we've not seen in previous decades, if you will. So these truths are relevant for all of us to understand the progression of temptation. And if you can just focus on doing your side for a moment, I'm going to use my example as a husband here. As a husband, I've been with my lovely bride. 2026, it'd be 41 years that we've been together. We got 2 children and 8 grandchildren. You know our story. But along the route of being married, through the decades of time that we spent together, you've got that fresh spring feel of here we are in high school and early 20s and all of that, all of that bustling love and high energy. And as years go by and challenges set in, the routines of caring for life, for marriage, for a spouse, back and forth, the pressures of raising kids, struggles with finances and all that stuff, sometimes it can put the mute button on what's going on within the marriage. And suddenly, because we're a Christian and we got a target on our back, and because God cares what happens, that he starts sending people our way. And the next thing you know, we're in the middle of the workplace and somebody gives us a nice comment that just happens to catch our ear. It's like, well, that kind of felt good. It may not be this extreme of what we're reading right here, but understand that those pushing those buttons, that they originate from Satan at the fall, and they continue on to our present hour, even all the way through what's happening here within Proverbs. But there's a breakdown in the framework of the marriage. And there's a responsibility for a man to, I'm going to use this word, and I know where I'm not in the study of some of Paul's epistles right now, but I hope that you can just receive it for what it is. That there's a responsibility within marriage for the man to develop his wife physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the whole 9 yards. There's a responsibility for a man to care for his wife in such a way. And I think in our time that men kind of push off of that. It's like, well, I'm bringing my 50% to the table. She got to bring hers. She got to care for herself and all that stuff. That's not how marriage is done. It's 100% on both sides of the aisle. And as we come together in this 100% thing, there are things that we are to do within our lane of life, if you will. And it's important that you have those conversations within your marriage. Man, if we were able to just start a retreat right here, right now, and venture into these topics, there's so much to learn about it. But the vein that we're in right now is all about the progression of temptation that is set before us. And this applies to married, it applies to single, it applies to man, it applies to woman. It is wisdom, the wisdom of God for Christians here, so that we can recognize the progression of temptation and these things that Satan wants to get out.